Allegiance together. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everyone. And I'll go ahead and read our mission statement this evening. The mission of the Red Wing Public Schools is to educate and inspire all students as they realize their full potential and become respectful, responsible, and productive citizens. All right. So tonight, our meeting agenda is to talk about school board procedures and to talk about how we can be more efficient and effective in our time together during our meetings. And then if we have any other board-related topics, I do have one. There's a proposal on the table by a community member on a proposal called Adopt a Winger, and I'll explain all about that, but it's a way for parents and teachers to be more connected. So I will tell you a little bit more about that. Does anybody else have anything they'd like to add under the other board-related topics?
Did you have something in there about agendas and did you just say that?
We're going to be talking about agendas during meeting efficiency and procedures. That's definitely part of those two things.
Yep, that's all I wanted to make sure.
Yeah. Yes, because we definitely need to figure out how to be more efficient on the agenda time. So good. Anything else? Maybe some things will come up as we go. But that is our sole purpose this evening, is to just talk about how things are going as our board is forming. We're in the forming stages still of this new 7-member board. And so we wanted to spend some time talking about how our procedures are going, what we like about what's happening, what we'd like to see changed or enhanced, and just get your feedback on how things are going overall with our school board. And then efficiencies. I talked to Nikki just earlier about tonight is fairly informal, so it's just a conversation. That's the main purpose of our workshops, is to have a more informal, casual conversation. There is no actionable items on the table this evening. It's just a time for us to come together and have more discussions about these related topics. So with that, I will go ahead and hand over the school board procedures to Superintendent Anderson. He'll give us a little bit of a background on where this came from and how this got to be on our agenda this evening.
Great. Thank you, Pam. We've had bits and pieces of the information in this handbook in other places for a number of years. And this year we decided to put it as one handbook. So I took a bunch of information, not only from those other sources internally, but also from the board evaluation that we conducted a year ago, from other MSBA sources. It does not include everything that should be included. In a lot of the areas, I just put something down on paper, knowing that this is the school board's handbook, the school board's rules of operations. So really the school board should be, making those decisions. So that's kind of the source of the handbook. The Legislative and Policy Committee did review it at its last meeting. Typically, I would take that feedback and then make adjustments in the handbook before presenting it to the full board. Because I was out though last week, that hasn't happened yet. I took some notes, and so I'm sure that we can review, not only my notes in conjunction with the handbook, but then also other comments as well. So I figured that's a good starting point. One thing that Anna suggested during the committee meeting was to actually have different people kind of just briefly present information from each article. And I thought that was really nice, so you don't get too sick and tired of listening to me all the time. So, if there is someone who wants to just lead the discussion in a particular article, or Pam could throughout the whole handbook, something like that, I think would be great. So again, this is a starting point for discussion.
Does any member of the legislative and policy committee, do they want to talk a little bit about your review and some discussion points that you had in your meeting?
Sure, I can. So we just, kind of read through the document, and we pointed out a few areas that we thought needed to be fleshed out a little bit to have a little more information, especially in light of some things that have kind of come up during the board meetings where there's been, disagreement or just discussion about what should be in the minutes and how the agenda should be structured. That the more of that we can lay out in here, the better that would be for everybody moving forward, and to keep our regular meetings moving efficiently, not spending too much time rehashing things. So I don't know if we want to just go through like section by section. The first section, Article 1, is just, kind of names and addresses of relevant people. So really it starts with Article 2 and the norms of operation.
Can I actually ask a question?
Yep.
I know the answer to this, but I think it's important for everyone to know where the names of the people that are listed under Article 1, how those came to be in this document.
Yeah, I can provide that response. Several years ago, there was a complaint filed against the school district with the Office of Civil Rights. As we were reviewing the complaint and discussing the issue with OCR, we agreed that we would include this information, about non-discrimination representatives in all of our handbooks. So you'll see the same document in the student handbook, employee, administrative procedures, the school board procedures, in any handbook, you'll see this document. There were some changes this past year as far as who serves as the ADA and Section 504 coordinator, Title IX coordinator, and human rights officer because of some recent retirements. And so a lot of the names are new on this particular page.
And Carson, are there specific things that the people that are listed here, do they have to go through any training or anything in particular to be listed as those officers and coordinators?
Yeah, and we still have some training to do, especially with regard to the human rights component. Sherry Johnson is very knowledgeable about ADA and Section 504 coordination. Also, Amy has kind of learned a lot this year just because of there have been a lot of accommodations because of COVID. So I would say both are well trained. Whenever there's a question that we're not sure about, then one of them will contact legal counsel for guidance. So I feel very confident there. We do not get many Title IX complaints in the school district. So when we do receive them, we typically work with our legal counsel to review the complaint and to come up with some determinations. Human rights in most years is pretty busy. That would include any complaints about bullying, harassment, and hazing, and those kinds of infractions. This year, the number of incidents have gone way down, largely because a lot of our kids are learning via distance learning. But that's one area that we do need to follow up on and make sure that both Jess and Amy are well trained in that area. We have had some complaints, and so once again, they'll either confer with me or with district legal counsel on how to proceed. And
as I remember, the human rights officers have traditionally been the director of teaching and learning. Like historically, I know Joe has done that, and Beth Borgen has done that. So it's traditionally been something that's a part of that, the director of teaching and learning that person's job description. Is that correct?
Yeah, and once again, because of, I think, a different OCR complaint several years ago, we agreed to change some of our policies in terms of who does what. And we have the human rights officers, and then if there's a complaining party that is not satisfied with that determination, then it would go to me as the, I believe I'm called the equity officer. So that's why we really try to choose some district-wide people to serve in that role, because then they have flexibility to go to different buildings and to address both student and staff issues. But then I'd be the next layer to review a complaint.
Well, and as I recall too, and then I'll just ask this last question and then turn it over to Jennifer and Holly. I see your names in the queue. When we did have a complaint about harassment, and I believe it was 2 years ago when this came up, and the person that was listed as a human rights officer was a male, and the person who had an issue was female, and we discussed how because of the issues surrounding that harassment complaint, we perhaps needed to not have a male be the interviewer, that it was really important to make sure that both genders were in here somehow, that we could make sure that if it's a female issue being harassed, it might have been easier for her to have spoken with a female. And that wasn't listed. There wasn't a female at that time listed in here. So I just want to make sure that we're thinking about those kinds of issues about gender equity and being helpful and responsive to those concerns that might come up, especially around harassment. All right, Nikki, Jennifer, and then Holly, and then Nikki.
Thank you, Pam. I was going to change the subject just a little bit, if that's okay, if we're ready to move on. On this page that Anna pointed out, Article 2, the norms of operation, I just wanted to mention under collaborative decision making, I really like that the first thing is to make decisions with equity as the primary priority. But I think it needs to be a priority for the board to have more training on what equity is, and so that we are kind of all on the same place in terms of what that means. And then also, I brought up a few things about equity before with our education plan, having equity actually be written on that sheet that is, our education plan that we present every time. There's nothing on there about equity, but we claim that it's our priority. And so I think we really need to make it clear to the public that it actually is. And I think we all need to work to be on the same page with that.
Yep, I definitely agree with you, Jennifer. And I spoke with Pam and Jim, I think last Tuesday virtually, and we agreed that we would have equity as a workshop topic in April. And those are two of the issues that we can discuss: board training and also, including some sort of statement on equity as part of the education plan. And we can also talk about some of the other work that we've been doing over the past, 1+ years, and
Okay,
other plans moving forward.
Yeah, thank you.
And while this comment is on the table, I think it'd be really great if you had some suggestions, Jennifer, or other people on the board. Maybe we could have some sort of a shortened training that evening, or at least a springboard, a start of some sort of training on that evening, since that'll be our overarching topic for April. It'd be really great if we didn't have to come back on another time or another evening for a training. I personally, I would much rather see a 3-hour meeting instead of a 2-hour meeting, and not have to come back for a third time for another training. I know. So anyway, Holly.
I'm going to take us back to the other thing that you were talking about, Pam. In terms of the person who hears the complaints, I'm a firm believer that HR should be the one hearing the complaints and doing the interviews. And I know we've had a pattern of having people who are the directors of curriculum instruction or kind of be in that role. But in my experience in Red Wing, it hasn't been a good idea. It's happened because we haven't had staffing. We don't have a lot of staff at the, director level. But having had to experience that in Red Wing, when I talked to the HR person originally, which was Connie Bryant, Jim, I found that her knowledge around complaints and things like that was much greater and much more useful to me than the director of curriculum and instruction at the time, who was Kathy Radmer. So I know that we have gone in that direction. I'm just saying I want it to be somebody trained in HR, trained in how to interview, how to investigate, somebody with the right legal components, the right credentials. So I'm real hesitant in supporting a situation where it's somebody coming from the outside who's not versed in those types of things. And I feel confident saying those names because of my experiences. So I just really feel strongly that it needs to be somebody in HR. And if we don't have enough people, we look in that direction. We don't grasp from other areas to fill spots, just to fill spots.
Yeah, I'll say that's a fair point because, Connie and now Amy, are trained in human resources management. And this is obviously an important part of that. The one possible exception, though, would be, I think, the ADA and Section 504 coordination. It's nice having Sherry or the special education director serving as somebody in conjunction with the HR person, just because, a student issue is so often, if there's an ADA or Section 504, complaint, it's nice to have an expert who's greatly involved.
You're muted, Holly. Start over.
Yes, well, I agree with you, Karsten. Student issues are multi-layered, and staff issues are different. But there needs to be one consistent person versed in the legalities of what an investigation looks like, and then who do you branch out to from there? Is it Karsten? Is it Sherry? Or how do we look at that? Because I'm still not sure that when people come in and they have something that they want to go to somebody confidentially with, that it's not clear. And I don't necessarily think when I was in the district, it was clear. And I was routed to Connie, Ms. Bryant, through other people, and she should have been my first stop. I really feel, based on the experience I had with her, I was like, so that was all coming in from when you had just started, Karsten. So that was a different experience, but I didn't see it really, getting much better because we had some people that were in conflict with other people, and it wasn't a clean slate for people to be able to bring their concerns forward.
Yeah, I'll add to that, Holly. I don't think most districts would have a main person and an alternate listed. And that might create some confusion. So for example, we have Amy French and Jess Whitcomb listed as human rights officers. Well, which one is it? And, so I think there could be some, conflicting information, as far as who goes where for those kinds of things.
And the training behind it.
And the what?
And the training behind it as well.
Right. Yep. Now, on the flip side, it's kind of nice to have a backup, just in case the HR person takes another position, or perhaps there's a conflict between someone and the human rights officer. So it's nice for that person to choose another one. But there might be some other ways of accomplishing that.
I mean, I've read in other districts where they actually use the attorney for that work.
Yeah, and we often rely on the attorney, but we, like having somebody here who can at least take the reports and screen them. For example, there's some harassment reports that are pretty routine, that we know how to handle when they come across our desks, but many of them are much more complicated, and we like to double check what we're doing, and so we often confer with the attorney on these kinds of things.
Okay. I'm just wondering if they should be part of the mix instead of the confer on the back end, that people don't know that that's happening.
Sure.
Well, and I think you bring up a really good point, Holly. There's a huge difference between, if you're an employee being harassed by, say, a coworker, or a student, in the case that I was thinking about, a student who is being harassed by another student and brought that forward. And so I think, we have to spell it out. I think it needs to be very clear who your go-to person needs to be. If you're an employee or if you're a student, this is your first stop. I think it needs to be 100% clear. If we have an alternate, that's great. And I think we maybe should have a couple alternates, because if there's, if we have two women here, and if there's, a male student who comes forward and isn't comfortable speaking to a female about what's going on, we should have a male who can step forward. Yeah. All right. I'll just leave it there. So I think we've got some work to do on Article 1.
Okay, great.
Nikki, you're in the queue.
My first question is going to be, well, hi, friend. Sorry, it was a bug that distracted me. How many of these people are of ethnicity? None?
That is a very good question. As a matter of typically how it would handle, I'm not going to announce who, the ethnic origins of a particular person, but I will say that I think having a more diverse group here would be helpful.
Well, I'm going to go with it. There's not really one on there. So I'm going to tell you right now, what are the first two words after? The district does not unlawfully discriminate on the basis of race or color. So right there is your problem. You're not, and I'm speaking on behalf of an ethnic person. We have a hard time, and it's not just limited to Native Americans. I converse with all different diverse backgrounds. And the Hispanic community feels this too, the African American community feels this too. But we have a problem with confiding in people that don't look like us. So therefore, the voices that keep getting unheard or keep on the bottom, but yet everybody else is being amplified because there's no representation of us on there. That's why.
Yeah, I can definitely see your point, Nikki. I'm not sure how we could reconcile that perspective with what Holly talked about, earlier. If we want one person to be responsible for those, for taking in those complaints, and yet we want a diverse pool of people, handling that. Yeah, I'm just not sure how we could reconcile those. But I think your point's well taken. It'd be just like what Pam was saying in terms of gender. There are particular situations when someone might feel more comfortable, speaking to someone who looks like themselves. I think that's your point too, Nikki.
But the thing is, and I'm pretty sure I speak on behalf of a lot of ethnic people, is we don't feel heard. You can sit there and tell me that you've heard me and it's taken in, but nothing has changed. Nothing. And on the basis of female and male, that's already been well discussed. I think that we need to really start focusing on the racial issue here.
Well, I'm going to throw out just an idea. and maybe this is something that we can just ponder for right now, but I wrote the word advocates down here. I know we've got a lot of liaisons that work in our district, and maybe what we need to have is a pool of advocates that when a staff member or a student comes forward, maybe an advocate, a trained advocate is somebody that they go to, and then the two of them make that complaint together. I don't know how that works in other districts, but I think your point is well taken, Nikki. A lot of people don't want to come forward because they're afraid to speak out because no one's going to get it. No one's going to understand. And I think, the harassment issue that this young student came forward to us it took her a long time to come forward too, because she was a female student who was being harassed by a male student. And I keep wanting to go back to that because she did come forward to our school board, and she asked us very specifically to not lose sight of this issue, that we need to do a better job. And so, Nikki, I think, if we can put our heads together at some point and think about ways that the non-discrimination and human rights, if there's a better, different way that we can do it, and maybe that's a matter of just making some calls to other school districts and see how they do it. Does anybody have an advocate model? Are there other, I can't believe that we would have to reinvent the wheel here, but I think that, Nikki, I really want to take your idea and run with it, because I think that is really an important piece that's missing here. You're right. This is all one, women, two, it's not, as diverse as we'd like it to be. And I don't know that we can make it diverse. I don't know that we can have, a pool of diverse human rights officers just at the ready, but we can have advocates. We can train advocates. And so maybe that's the route to go.
I think the logical thing, working within our current policies and procedures would be to, like you said, Pam, to identify advocates who could serve as report takers. We list currently in our complaint process, we list report takers as a building principal or designee, and then we list the same people in the document that we just looked at, or the superintendent if it involves a human rights officer, or the school board chair if it involves me. So really, it's just a very limited group, but certainly we could identify and work with people who could serve as advocates, who could take the reports. We could train them on how to take reports and then submit them so that they can, work with the complainant on addressing concerns. So, I mean, that would be, I think, changing the process, I think, would be relatively easy. The trick would be to identify those people who could, who would be willing to serve in that capacity. But I think we could do it.
I'm happy to hear that we're moving the dial a little bit here, because I think that's really important. But I also think then that when we have that list of people who are report takers, that I think it absolutely has to be put out there that everybody, that's your first stop then. And people need to know without hesitation or question, I've got this concern, here's who I need to go to for it. So, Holly.
I'm going to go back to the importance of getting people in the positions that are trained and qualified, so that if we do have advocates in different areas throughout the district, we have them going to somebody who is trained and qualified. So in the chat right now, a human rights officer, you have to do more than what we're expecting from our human rights officer. And it's unfair to put somebody with that title on without the training and the knowledge in the background to be able to take what people are saying and understand the laws and everything behind it. So again, I'm going to stick with, we have to be very clear when we do things like this, that we're not just putting somebody in the position to fill the position.
Good point, Holly. And of the two people that are listed, do either of them have any of the training and the advanced degree to be able to fill that role?
I don't know.
I'm asking Karsten, sorry.
Yeah, you're talking about Holly's chat.
Yeah, I mean, we have Jess Whitcomb and Amy French as the human rights officers listed in Article 1. Are either of them qualified with their degree and their training to be able to actually be able to fit that job description well?
I'm not sure where the qualification section comes from. I don't think that they would meet what Holly listed there.
Okay.
Our district attorney.
Yeah, our district attorney would definitely meet that in terms of human rights law or a related field.
Right.
You know, I think related field, you know, maybe could be debatable, I suppose, because it depends on a person's background. But you know, definitely the district attorney would meet that.
Okay.
So maybe the district attorney needs to also be listed under the human rights officer, or maybe that's our first stop. But I think your point is well taken, Holly. We need to kind of clean this up greatly. We need to have that one go-to person who can speak to all the things that you were talking about, Holly. So, you know, whether it's getting support for Jess and or Amy to get them up to speed on what they need to do to be that first stop person, along with an advocate and a complainant. But let's make sure that we give that officer or officers the training and the background that they need to be able to carry that job out efficiently and effectively.
Thank you.
Yeah. Nikki.
I was just going to say, because I'm a human rights commission for Red Wing, and there's a lot of limitations that we have as the human rights for the city of Red Wing. And what a lot of things that we have to follow have to go through the city attorney. You know, so what Holly's saying is you have to be very careful when receiving complaints as a human rights officer, because that's actually the process we're trying to figure out as the commission with the city. And they've put a lot of limitations on us because of the legality. Yeah, I think that was all I had to talk about with that.
You know, kind of related to that, Nikki, is, you know, we've kicked around the possibility of having a lawyer actually conduct interviews in person with complainants and witnesses, because then at least there's some distance between the investigation and those who might be involved. You know, clearly our school attorneys from Minneapolis would not fit that bill, just because of the distance they are from us. If there was a local attorney who was appropriately trained and would be willing to, and would have flexibility to help us out on a case-by-case basis, that might be a possibility. I'd be much more open to that than asking someone from the cities to drive down on 4 different days to investigate different complaints. So, and I think that's kind of getting at what Nikki was saying. Nikki, have they chosen someone for that role or not?
For what?
Or like, you know, for the contact person?
Not yet. We're still in the process of trying to figure it out. It's a long process. We're over a year into it, trying to figure it out back and forth between city council and human rights. But here's another thing too, and this is probably going to be brought up when the Native American Parent Committee comes. But also, I wouldn't limit just training for just the human rights officers. I would definitely, especially with in speaking solely on race and color, the diversity training that all staff is going to want to take. I know Native American, excellent Native American group that came, they're Thrivent. They talk about historical trauma. They're from South Dakota. They presented for the county, Goodhue County, and Prairie Island, and the response that they got from Goodhue County when they presented was pretty amazing. When you hear it, and coming from a different Native American group, I'm going to tell you this, there's tension between Red Wing and Prairie Island. Why? Because of the history. Okay, So what I may talk about my experience here, a non-native may not want to hear it coming from me because of the tensions and their feelings towards Prairie Island the way already. So they're not going to want to listen to me. But coming from a different Native American explaining my experience, it was the barrier was lifted. So they were able to hear our experience with an open heart. I also have communications, and I've worked with an African American man, Thomas Harris, that's done a lot of work in Red Wing with the Human Rights Group. He's from La Crosse. He does diversity training and tries to get all these different groups of people together to work together. And he's at the university, I think, down in La Crosse, not high school. He would be an excellent resource to talk to about all these trainings. Those are just my suggestions. I obviously know the life, so I didn't really need the training, but even just sitting in with the historical trauma training, it validated me and my feelings, so it was not only just beneficial to the non-native, it was incredibly beneficial to us Native Americans too, validating everything that has happened to us.
Thank you, Nikki. I really appreciate you sharing that. And I've been through that trauma training too, and it is phenomenal. So that might be something that might be on our list of things that we could do as a group here too. Arlen, you've been in the queue. Thank you for being patient.
Thank you. What we're discussing here right now is a draft of Red Wing School District School Board procedures. And this was presented to the policy committee here a couple weeks ago, and we touched on a few things. But what's being done is we're pulling things from several areas out of our whole school district policy. And what's showing up here right now, obviously, is an issue in our non-discrimination policy and reporting procedures that we are just pulling into, in my opinion, we are just pulling into the school board procedures. And this goes back to what Pam was talking about. We have to work a lot harder on our non-discrimination policy and procedures for reporting and different things. And so it's not just in this school board procedures, but it certainly is pulled out. Hey, we got a problem back in our regular policy, because I think most of this stuff is just being pulled out of our regular policy for the district. So I would encourage us to talk about it more if we need to tonight, but we need to really, as a priorities, investigate our whole non-discrimination policy in all of our district policies, not just here. I don't think this says here in what we have tonight that this is a school board procedures draft. I don't think it's anywhere near ready to bring it in front of the board in the near future because of some of these other things. But I'd like to comment on one other thing a little bit farther down here. And then hopefully if we got more non-discrimination, I'm just doing this because I've got the floor right now. Continuous improvement, when we discussed that at the policy committee meeting, I know I said that we should look at some different wording on continuous improvement. It says we are committed to an ethic of continuous improvement. We will, and one was item 3, annually evaluate the superintendent. While we're doing it twice a year right now, I think that should be changed wording at least annually. It was unsuggested wording. Another one, we will participate in at least 2 other learning sessions sponsored by the MSBA each year. I don't personally believe the board has the authority to say you have to do that. I think we should put wording that we will encourage board members to participate. Look at wording similar to that on that. And I skipped over item 5, and we will complete phase 1 through 4 training sessions sponsored by the Minnesota School Board Association. Once again, I think the word should encourage board members. We will encourage all board members to complete it. So that's just wording that I'm looking for in this draft on that section here. As far as the non-discrimination, I think Nikki brings up a valid point. We have to have a method for different ethnic groups, people of color, natives, whatever they are, to make them comfortable in doing their reporting. But that, once again, I think that's an issue that goes back to the whole non-discrimination policy, not just specific to the school board thing. So hopefully we can get a lot more discussion. I don't know if it comes back to legislative policy committee or if it's something we should do as a board and a workshop dedicated by itself just for that one item. I almost think that would be the way to go, and I'm talking way too much here, so I'm gonna stand back. Thank you.
Thank you, Arlen. I actually just wrote that down. Do we need a workshop on this? So thank you for that. I put that on our list of things to talk about tomorrow, Karsten and Jim. So we'll have a discussion on that, Arlen, because you're right. This does bring that back up for us to be reminded that we absolutely need to work on those policies and procedures. And so Karsten and Jim and I, maybe we can tackle, maybe a way to address that moving forward. I need to keep us moving here. So Anna and then Jim, and then we'll move on through the articles.
Excuse me. Yeah, I just wanted to echo what Arlen said, that, this document is for the school board operation, not necessarily the district operation. So yes, I think we absolutely have work to do on that anti-discrimination or non-discrimination policy and procedures. But I would like to keep us moving forward because I think that's a much larger conversation that, whatever the district we determine for the district as far as that policy goes would be reflected in this handbook. But in terms of this handbook that we're going through, right now, I think what needs to go in here is what the current procedures are. Not that they don't need to be changed, but that's why I kind of skimmed over that article, because it's maybe not the biggest issue in terms of like the school board operations, like us as a board and how we operate, just in terms of all the other things that are in there.
Thank you, Anna. Jim.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good discussion. This is what workshops are about. Having that open dialogue, time to talk about things without decision making, and a lot of good points brought up here tonight. And I think at the end of the day, this will go back to the committee for further review and redrafting or drafting. Applaud Nikki for stepping up and saying things like this. It's not easy for people to say stuff like that. I applaud her. I'm a white male. I don't understand everything. I never said I do. And one of my goals in life is to learn something new every day. I believe in treating people the same, no matter what you look like, what male, female, whatever, anything. I totally believe in that. And so going forward, I think getting a list of, if advocates is the way we end up going, this board and the school district people can submit names to the superintendent or the principals, and we can go from there, give a committee something to work on. But I know we have a lot to do here on this, but I just wanted to say, I think at the end of the day, when this is all done, this will go back to the committee to digest and tweak and make it a better document than what it is today.
Well, and I'll just add that it really excites me and makes me super proud that we're having this conversation and that we've got some sort of idea on how we can make every voice feel heard and respected, especially when it comes to touchy issues that people are bringing forward, not just touchy issues, but very deep personal issues, harassment, bullying. Those are really difficult conversations to bring forward, and allegations. And we want to make sure that every voice is equally heard. And you're right, Jennifer, when we talk about equity, and if that's our number one priority, we need to make sure that we continue every decision with that lens on. And I think being able to have this conversation and try to turn the dial and make sure that even as we have harassment allegations come up, how can we make sure that that's being brought to the table with an equity lens? How are those voices heard and understood and supported? And I'm very excited and happy that we're having this conversation. So thank you, everybody. It's already 6:48 and we're only on Article 2. So let's keep moving through. Anything else that we want to bring up on norms of operation? I think your point, Arlen, about encouraging instead of saying that you have to participate. I mean, that is hard to be able to do if we're all working individuals. So I like the idea of encouraging that work instead of requiring that. Anything else that anybody else would like to bring up about Article 2?
And then also Jennifer's comments about equity in terms of decision making and including that as part of the education plan. I'm not sure if that'll change the document, but at least we can address that at an upcoming meeting.
Yeah, I'm writing that down.
I think it would be good for us to require phase 1 and 2 training sessions. But I think, to Arlen's point, not all of the sessions are offered all of the time. So, and then when we met in our committee, we were talking about, the way that it's worded is as though as a new board member, I would complete phase 1 through 4 and 2 other learning sessions sponsored in the course of my first year. And I haven't seen levels 3 and 4 offered yet. So it may not even be possible for me to meet that requirement, even if, the timing worked out for me. So I think that was kind of part of our discussion as well. I think it would be good to require phase 1 and 2 because I think they're pretty basic. But as a one-time thing, not that you would have to do that every year as a board member, but as an incoming board member. So we talked about tweaking some wording there so that it would be maybe those 1 and 2 a requirement for incoming new board members, but then, to encourage that continuing education throughout the life of your time on your service on the board. If you're on the board for 12 years, that you continually get updates because of course things change, laws change, and, best practices change and things like that.
Good point. I think is 1 and 2, are those required through the state?
I think they are. I'm not sure how they monitor that.
I think it is. I think it is required 1 and 2. That's why they're listed as mandatory trainings in that leadership conference in January. But yeah, you're right. 3 and 4. I know there's a 4 coming up in April, but I do like the idea of needing to change that wording. So yeah, good. Anything else on Article 2? All right, moving to Article 3, evaluation of the superintendent. So the timeline there was something that Arlen worked on drafting when he was on as the chair, and then he and I worked on it last year. The reason for the timeline is because of there are many ways we could do this timeline, and I'm not married to this timeline. We could change it. We could keep it the way it is. The reason that Arlen and I had worked on changing it to this timeline is June would be, we would do a very big full evaluation in November of the superintendent. And we chose that time because his contract, or the superintendent contract, is up the end of June. And so if the evaluation in November spurred us on as a group to say, we want to go a different route, then we would have time between November and June to start looking for a new candidate and also give our current candidate time to put his name in the ring for a different job as well. If we were to decide in June, if we did the full big evaluation in May or June, then it would be a whole nother year before we'd be able to, I mean, we can terminate a contract at any time, but in the cycle of looking for new jobs in the superintendent world, that's kind of how we felt like it made the most sense. And it also coincided with contracts and when the superintendent's contract is up and when we would be negotiating his new contract. So that's kind of how that timeline evolved. It used to be that we did the big evaluation in May and June, and it just didn't make sense to Arlen and I when we were conducting it when Arlen was conducting it that last year. I don't want to put words in your mouth, Arlen, but help me out if I think that's is exactly what we were why we changed the timeline. Do you want to say anything about that?
Sure. That's the basic part of it. I mean, we could have this discussion, who should, a new board, old board, whatever, deciding when to enter into a new contract if they so desire. But the whole concept of the evaluation is if things are going well, we know that prior to the time that would be looking at to extend a contract or letting the superintendent know that it's maybe time to start looking. So I totally am on board with the evaluation timeline. That's what it revolved around, is it's made the most sense with timing of superintendent contracts overall throughout the state of Minnesota. So as far as existing one looking for a new job and us trying to bring in a new one, it all fits together better.
And I will say, prior to changing this timeline, there wasn't a mid-year evaluation. We didn't really have that dig in the middle of the year, kind of put your toe in the water and see how he's doing. We just gave continual feedback, but it's nice to be able to do a little bit more formal. Here are your goals that you talked about in November. We bring them back up in May. How are you doing? How are things going? Do we need to tweak anything? And then give more direction further. So right now, that June timeline, the June is kind of a dip your toes in the water, kind of how are things going, and then the November is the big one. Carson, I'll give it to you, and then Jim.
Yeah, just a little context. We have the two evaluations now because we were following best practices suggested by the Minnesota School Board Association. So that's why we added the extra evaluation. There is one change compared to earlier versions of this process. I think Jim had mentioned this as far as having a rough draft of the evaluation summary before the evaluation session by the board. So the board could actually look at the kind of the initial draft of the evaluation. It kind of focuses the discussion, and then then you can discuss if that's accurate or something needs to change. I think that'll make things go a little bit more efficiently and effectively. And then also Anna, during the policy committee meeting, had suggested that if we're talking about deadlines or timelines for evaluations, that we should probably include something as far as possible negotiations, with the superintendent. What would the best time be for that?
Yeah, I had thought, since watching you guys have that conversation in November and December, I thought, if something like that could be spelled out, it would just make it clearer for everybody moving forward that, because periodically, every couple of years, there is a good chance that there will be incoming board members in January when a contract would be offered or not offered. So I thought it might make sense to put that in there.
I think that's an excellent suggestion and definitely needed. So do we want to hash that out now, or do we want to give it some thought and try and figure out bring it back to the policy committee to or personnel committee to hash that out? Where does that make the most sense? Probably personnel committee, because that's the group that usually talks to and works through the contract negotiations with the superintendent.
Yeah, and certainly we can talk about it there, and then obviously we'd bring it back to the full board and then make a decision then.
All right. Jim.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Anna kind of hit on, she must have been watching must have had trouble sleeping some nights back in November and December watching this take place. But little history and a decision made, we go on, I'm fine with that. Back when Hal and I got on about March, they did the evaluation then. Then board members, who I do not believe are here anymore, said that we shouldn't be involved in the process because we're too new. And so we took a little bit of offense to that. And now they switched it to November. Okay. But we argued on behalf of the new board coming in to be involved in exactly what you said, Anna, was the negotiation part of it. It's decided in December, while the old board's on. 3 of the members for sure were getting off back when it started the process in October. So I just, obviously we wanted the whole board should be involved because the new board's going to be working 2 years with the superintendent. In this case, is Karsten. The other issue about that on another level, it never was brought up that I struggled with yet is when we're negotiating in October, November, December, but that doesn't stop any superintendent from leaving in March, April, and May for another position. So we're trying to protect that person to keep this, he or she to keep, but he or she could leave on according to the contract at any time after. So I struggled with that a little bit, and maybe the policy committee can address those things that you can't stop somebody else from looking. I get that. I'm not here to hamper that. But I guess when they went from one position to another, it just, I didn't think it was right. So that's why I spoke up and said I thought the new board should be involved in the negotiation. I think Arlen to some degree agreed with that too, about the new board should be involved in the negotiation part of the superintendent contract going forward. And I will mute. Thank you.
Oh, I just noticed that Pam was kicked out of the meeting, so perhaps we should wait a minute or so.
I would agree. As vice chair, we'll hold the meeting here unless Pam rejoins.
There she is.
I hit hang up instead of mute, so sorry about that.
Okay. I didn't know if we had to do an investigation to see if Karsten kicked you out or not here. So.
No, I think that having it very crystal clear, cut and dry, I think will help us. We all know that, we have to have a little bit of flexibility too, but I think if we have a general guideline and outline of what to follow, I think this board, I think it will just all work out really well, and it'll be much easier process. So thank you for all that feedback. It's definitely a difficult thing to do all of those things. The superintendent evaluation is a big job, and that's what this board is. It's one of our number one priorities. I mean, he's our one and only employee, so we have to take that very seriously, and we want to do its due diligence. But also, the timeline needs to protect us as a district as well. We, take Karsten off for a minute. Regardless of if Karsten's here or somebody else, we want to be able to also give us the best possible opportunity if we need to find a superintendent. When are they looking for a job? And we want to be ahead of the game a little bit and make sure that we have an opportunity for the very best possible candidate for our district at any point in time. And so, this timeline is extremely important when we think about what is in the best interest of our district. So thank you. This is a really important discussion. All right, moving us on to board and committee meetings.
Madam Chair, Arlen in the queue.
Okay, I missed that. Sorry, Arlen, when I hit.
You were out when I signed in, so.
Sorry, Arlen.
I just want to say, in my opinion, Article 3, the way it's written, looks very good to me, and I think the timeline is right on that. I have not seen anything in the policy here, school board procedures, that says when we will negotiate superintendent contracts. And I think that's good that we don't, because if you do try to put a timeline when we do it, I will fight it vehemently, because you never know what circumstance might prompt something to be done. I'm looking at a larger district within 50 miles of us that ran into some issues, and it's common that some districts have it. And so I think employment and contracts are a whole different thing, and I don't think we need that in the procedures. That's just something that you automatically would do at a certain time.
Also a good point. Well, those are the kinds of things that this group needs to hash out and figure out. Is, do we want to have a timeline, or do we want to be a little bit more flexible? I think that perhaps the personnel committee can have a discussion about that at our next meeting, or in an agenda coming up, and bring some ideas back to this board, if that would be okay. On should we have hard and fast deadlines or flexible deadlines? Should we not have anything in there at all? I think the point is well taken, Arlen, about, we don't necessarily want to also pigeon us into a hole that we can't get out of either. So anyway, if it's all right with everybody, I'll put it on our personnel committee agenda to just continue that conversation. All right, good. Sorry about that, Arlen. When I looked in the queue, it all has been gone because I left the meeting and came back. So my apologies for that. Board and committee meetings. We all know that we have a lot of committees that we are a part of. So this is the time of the night that we should talk about, how are those meetings going? Is it overwhelming? And also, do we, what about the timing of those meetings? That's a part of that discussion, as well as we talked about here in this paper about the agendas and how those, what we talk about in our committees, how that gets brought back to the larger board. So I have a couple people in the queue I see, and I will turn it over, Arlen, and then Holly.
Thank you. In general, things look all right to me, but I guess I'm looking for some clarification. Was probably heightened by some of my comments at a board meeting here in this past month or so. Are committee meetings minutes that are actually written and then approved by a committee, or are they notes from a meeting that are presented to the board? And my opinion is, for the most part, that those are notes of what took place in a meeting, because I know I've been to many committee meetings and we have not approved the minutes from the past meeting. There are committees I have served on that do have minutes that are approved also, but they're usually Health and Safety Committee and some other things. But I really have not participated in approving minutes in some of our basic committees. So I'm just throwing that out there.
And I can respond just to give context. Again, it's up to the board to decide which way you want to do it. In the past, we've treated committee meetings, or we've set up notes. So they have not been officially approved by the committee before presentation to the board. So we'd have the committee meeting, we'd have some notes, and then we'd present that to the board. What this document has, again, for discussion, is that the committee would, or the committee chair would provide a verbal update at the next regular meeting, and then the committee would approve minutes at its next committee meeting, and then that would be posted, with the board. So again, I'm okay either way, but I just want to give you some context.
And by doing that, what you just discussed, Karsten, we wouldn't see those minutes for like 2 months, or at least 6 weeks, right? Because you'd have like personnel's meeting March 8th, and then we'd bring the minutes of March 8th to the March 15th meeting, right? And then
Correct.
And then, so we would review them, and would we okay them that night, or would we bring them back to the following meeting for approval?
What this indicates is that if we had the meeting on March 8th, which we will, and then the committee would review the rough draft of the minutes at its first meeting in April, and then it would go to the board the second meeting in April. So that's how it's written now. Again, I'm okay regardless, just as long as we're on the same page.
Who's in the queue? Jim, are you next? No, Holly, sorry.
Alias, yep.
Yeah, I'm going to peel it back even a little bit further. I have a couple things to say. One, who takes the minutes at our committee meetings in the sense of who formalizes them for us? Because I see them pop up. I'm thinking it's Lisa, but before we had a Lisa, nobody did it. So I like it that we're starting to get more organized in this area. That's very, very helpful. But let's do it with the intent that we don't want it to be more laborious for Lisa and for us. But I do think there should be some scripts that come off of our meetings. And Arlen, you said they should be just more informal notes that people should have when they go to the next meeting. And I don't know if that's the way it should be, or if they should be formalized, agreed upon minutes from the committee.
Yeah, and just to answer your question, Holly, before Lisa started, there were two people who'd take notes. Jackie would take the finance committee notes, and then I would take notes for the other committees. But after Lisa started, now she's doing the committee meetings for the ones that I've done previously. Jackie has still been doing the financial notes or minutes. So that's kind of where we are now.
Does that happen for every committee?
It happens for the main committees. So personnel, operations, policy, legislative and policy, and then Jackie does the finance committee meetings. Negotiations, I know Lisa's attended, I think, 1 or 2 sessions and did some notes, but I'm not sure if those are as important to document in formal minutes, because we always have proposals going back and forth with negotiations.
Okay. All right. So I guess we have to then just talk about what we want the outcome to be. Are we wanting it to be formal or informal?
Jim and then Arlen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good question. Good dialogue. Ever since I've been on the board, we get they're titled minutes from the committees. Minutes to me mean it's a formal document that was transpired as to what happened at the meeting. If you want to call them notes, that's probably even a better way to handle it, because then it's an informal dialogue as to what somebody had captured in a snapshot as to what happened on issues addressing the committee that day. I guess thinking more about it, it does get cumbersome to hold off in submitting the minutes for 6 to 8 weeks after the meeting happens. But when something is submitted, it should be, it's not the official transcript of what happened because it hasn't been approved by anybody. And the board's not being asked to approve it unless they're asked to approve it in the consent agenda. And they shouldn't be, because the committee hasn't even reviewed them to see if they should be tweaked at all. Sometimes they only come out less than a week after the meeting, and we haven't had a chance to meet, and you don't want to violate the meeting law. So maybe they should be called notes of the meeting, of that committee meeting on that day. And they can be brought back to the following committee. If they don't need to be adjusted, just leave them be as they are. And everybody in the board will know that the notes dictated what basically transpired during that committee meeting.
Arlen, Anna, Holly.
Yeah, and certainly I'd be okay with that suggestion. It kind of bridges the two perspectives. We clearly identify it as notes, and then still give kind of informal descriptions.
Yeah, and I'll just piggyback on, yeah, because once we say minutes on there, that, to me, that's the official thing that happened at that meeting, just like the school board minutes when we approve them, Jennifer signs them, but they're called minutes because of a reason. And they're brought back to the next meeting, which is 2 weeks away normally, or 3 sometimes, but very soon, very quick turnaround compared to the committees.
Harlan?
Yeah, thank you. I want to clarify who was taking notes from the meeting. That's the correct word to use, I believe. I have taken notes when I've been on committees and Carson was unable to be there. We were continuing on, and I believe it was Operations Committee. It could have been, but when somebody else in the district wasn't taking it, somebody at the meeting took those notes and wrote them down so they could be forwarded on. And Jim has nailed it right on the head. That's probably the hangup we got, is that we're calling these items minutes from the meeting, and they really are notes from what I've experienced most of the time, because I don't recall approving them at the next meeting as minutes in most of these committees that I've been on. So, and I do think it'd be very cumbersome to wait until a month later meeting to approve them and then show them to the board. I think that's cumbersome, and I think that if the notes are inaccurate, the fact that our board members, our committee is composed of board members, if the notes are inaccurate, there's an opportunity at that next meeting to clarify that. If the committee felt that those notes were inaccurate, they could clarify if the board has a problem with it. So I'm very supportive of the idea of having notes taken and getting it to the board as soon as we can for the next meeting, so that we have this information in front of us.
Yep, I agree with that. I think calling them notes is good. Also, in my understanding of parliamentary procedures, minutes record action items, and committees can't really truly have action items. We can't vote on anything in a committee, so we can have discussion about things and work through a lot of things, but it still has to come before the board for an actual decision. And then that decision is what should be recorded in minutes. So I think that, yeah, I would just call them notes and go from there.
Holly?
Yes, discussion notes, perfect. Okay, that just was like full circle from my original question. Now, this was my other question that I didn't ask prior. So I know that in Red Wing, it has been past practice that the board chair and the vice chair meet with the superintendent every week or every other week. And to me, that's always felt a little imbalanced. So I don't know how it started. I don't know if it's best practice across all school boards that the chair and the vice chair get their own meeting with the superintendent to discuss the agenda or to discuss other things, but it feels like there might be things that are discussed that maybe we should all be discussing for the first time through, instead of having a couple people know what's going to happen prior to the agenda. So 2 things I'm thinking of is, one, if the board chair and the vice chair have a meeting with the superintendent, somehow we're informed of the topics. Like there's a note that comes out from the superintendent, these were the topics that were discussed, or those meetings don't happen and we conduct board business in person, or online, because it just, and it's not Jim and Pam now. This has been a past practice in Red Wing that's always confused me since I've gotten on the board. Like, wait a minute, it feels like there's 2 agendas. There's the one with the board chair and the superintendent, and then there's the agenda that the other board, the rest of the board is supposed to be working on. So that's something I just want us to think about when we're talking about committees or meetings or different things like that.
Yeah, and I think that's an excellent question. And the important thing for me is to be on the same page regardless of what the decision is made. Did the city go through a process where the agenda committee became a public meeting? I can't remember. or not. I've never explored that. But to give more context, I think when I first started here, I would meet periodically with Mitch Bolt, who was the board chair at the time. I don't think it was a weekly thing, but then as time went on, the meetings with the board chair became weekly. And then just a few years ago, again, I don't remember who was chair at the time, but then the chair also wanted the vice chair to participate in those meetings as well. And so that's where we are now. I find them very valuable, personally. But, so there's that value. And then at the other way, I hear what you're saying, Holly, because, I hesitate sharing information with just one board member and not all board members. And so I'm trying to explore how to best do that. So sometimes I'm not responding to emails right away. I'd rather, share that information in an administrative report or an email to everyone. And so, I think your question leads to some other questions too, as far as how we want to treat that information.
Well, and I'll just piggyback on that. It's been a very valuable time for me as well, because the main agenda is to figure out what the agenda is. So that's an important topic that's on my to-do list every single time we meet. The second piece is, what are we going to do for workshops? And who's going to facilitate them? Who's going to lead them? Do we need a speaker? Those kinds of things is what we talk about. I always take notes for all of those meetings. I'm happy to share. Here's the list of things that we talked about, if that would be helpful. Quite honestly, if I got back an hour of my week, that wouldn't hurt my feelings any either. But I think that it's very important. Whoever the chair is has a good open line of communication, especially in the pandemic. It was really important for me to be able to know what was going on in a timely manner. And so, I think that was important. Jim and Arlen, do you want to share anything more about those meetings?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was going to bring it up tomorrow with us, so great for Holly to bring it up too a little bit. I find them valuable to have that time to see what's going on, because one or two people may not be the only ones that should be coming up with the agenda for the next meeting or two. And that's why we have it in here on this thing here on page 8. You people can email stuff. But I think what I'm piggybacking to, and we'll talk again tomorrow, because we are meeting tomorrow, because we have a board meeting next Monday. And maybe we need to meet those Tuesdays prior to board meetings and not the other Tuesdays, give you back another day or two of your month, Pam. But I know when I first got on, I wanted to get something on the agenda, and Carson wouldn't put it on there because the chair hadn't had a chance to talk to the chair. So I added it at the meeting, and then another board member got upset because I added something at the meeting. And that's like, well, why? I couldn't go, they wouldn't let me put it on at the agenda. So you as a board member have a right to add something to the agenda at any board meeting. So with that, I think Holly's idea of Karsten sending out an email to the board members saying, these are topics we're looking at discussing in the next meeting or two, just an FYI for you, further information to come. If you have anything else to add to the agenda, please share it with him and all of us. So, and the other thing is, everybody has a right to schedule a meeting with the superintendent too, on a weekly or regular or monthly or bi-monthly meeting. That works. But I think we it's nice to meet, but I think we could probably cut the meetings back, Madam Chair, to maybe a couple times a month it'll free up a couple hours of his time to do something too. So we'll talk tomorrow again, because we are going to meet tomorrow because we have a board meeting next Monday. So, and then I'll ask, and Carson's listening, he'll send out an email later that day to say, these are what we are looking at discussing down the road. Fair enough?
Yeah. Jennifer and Arlen.
I appreciate your question, Holly. I had the same question that I wanted to bring up. And I just wanted to say that I appreciate the three of you meeting. I think it's important. I think it's basically an executive committee that's kind of setting the agenda, making the decisions to make sure that our meetings are fine-tuned and focused. And so I appreciate that, but it would be nice to have more information about what is discussed at that meeting. I know I brought up a few ideas of things that I would like to see on the agenda that have not been on the agenda yet. And I know that we have so much going on, and I appreciate that they likely will be. But just to know what the discussion was and why those things were not addressed, that would be good information for us to know.
Just a question, Jennifer. Have you sent something to me? I've not received any emails from you or phone calls about topic items.
I have not. I have been sending them to Pam and Karsten.
So,
and there are things that have been, I mean, number of things have been brought up in giving information, but just some of the, especially the equity things that I brought up tonight have been things that have been on my mind that I think are important, even though COVID is number one and it's in every meeting we need to discuss it. I do think that equity is a huge part of what's happening with COVID, and it needs to happen now. It's just too important to not address. And I appreciate Nikki bringing it up every time we meet so that we don't lose track of that. But I would like to know more information about what happens at your meetings. Not that I don't want them to happen, because I appreciate that they're valuable to all three of you. And like I said, help make the school board meetings go more efficiently. I would just like to know what the discussion topics are.
And I'll just add, equity is a big thing. I would ask that you include me to be equal then. The equity, not just 2 out of the 3. So I'm part of that, as you stated. So, but for some reason I was not included.
Absolutely, Jim. I appreciate that. I guess I was just thinking superintendent and chair, and that's where I was, but you're absolutely right.
And again, just for the purpose of context, the relevant policy is policy 203.5. And that says, while all school board members may provide input, it shall be the responsibility of the school board chair and superintendent to develop, prepare, and arrange the order of items for the tentative school board meeting agenda, for each meeting. Now, that's what the policy says, but, of course, over the last few years, we have the chair, vice chair, and superintendent kind of meeting to discuss those topics. So, again, as long as we're on the same page, I think that's the important thing. Another thing that we could bring back again is a more comprehensive list of upcoming agenda topics by meeting date. I used to do that quite a bit years ago. I'd list every single meeting and then the tentative topics. Now, those would change a lot with time because it's hard to predict what's going to happen 5 months later. But that might help as far as what Jennifer suggested in terms of knowing that, okay, we're going to talk about equity during the workshop in April, and it's listed there. So it's not just Karsten talking about that it's actually there. So that might be one partial step, but then we can, follow through with the ideas that were brought up tonight too.
I think that's a really great suggestion, Karsten. And I think when we went through the strategic plan, that was part of the recommendation. And the end was to revisit each of those goals on a regular basis and find out what's happening in each of those areas. And so that needs to be put on agendas on a regular rotating basis. So if we had that all listed out, and maybe as an attachment in our board packet, that might be helpful as well. Arlen, you're in the queue.
Thank you. I'm gonna probably be the one that's responsible for getting this to where it is, and I'm not sure if it's right where it's at right now with the superintendent, chair, vice chair, but I'll put the history out there. When I became chair, usually the board chair met with Karsten to work on the agenda for the upcoming meetings. Our agenda packet was not coming out until Thursday or Friday, and and we worked on trying to get that agenda packet out earlier to kind of match up with the policy so that there's time for board members to read the packet and still ask questions from Carson if they would like. And those meetings weren't regular all the time at the same day. And it got to be a difficult time trying to schedule it. And finally found a time on Tuesday morning, which was the day before the agenda usually goes out, that Carson could free up for an hour and work on the agenda. And as board chair, I wanted to make sure the vice chair was informed what was going on in case they had to take over the meetings. So it was good to have the vice chair attend. Plus Pam had a desire to express a desire to become chair someday. And I thought it was good training to see what's going on in those meetings and stuff. And it's kind of evolved to being that. But Carson, what he just stated here, it is exactly right. The agenda is set by the superintendent and the board chair. And I've always felt that if the vice chair is there, it's at the discretion, invitation, whatever of the chair, whether that person is there. And I think it's good that the vice chair is there to be in on what's going to happen, especially now with COVID and online learning. And Pam, we lost Pam for a little bit here tonight. We got her back right away, luckily, but the vice chair has got to be ready to step in and kind of know what's going on in that agenda in the event the chair can't carry it through at the meeting. So trying to find the exact right mix for that is maybe a little difficult. I tried to work mainly with agenda items and stuff in my discussions when Pam was there with me. When Pam was there as chair and I was vice chair, I did throw out some ideas on agenda timing because they were talking about should this be this month or this month. But it certainly is the chair's responsibility what takes place in that meeting, in my opinion.
Holly?
Yes, thank you. Okay, so to synthesize it, is it important or is it prudent that we then call it the agenda committee? And that way it has a little bit more transparency.
We absolutely can call it that. I mean, I have no problem with that.
And then Carson sends out an email, Tuesday or Wednesday, the agenda committee discussed X, Y, and Z. And then that way it can trigger any thought in our brains like, oh yeah, that did happen. Or, oh, I did talk to somebody about that. Or, oh, I want to know more about that.
Perfect.
Okay.
So what I'm hearing is maybe the agenda committee meets with the superintendent on the Tuesday prior to a school board meeting. Or I gotta say, I like the Tuesday prior to a workshop. And that can be, maybe penciled in because there are some times where it's very helpful for me as the chair to know exactly what else do we need to do or put together to make that workshop run. I don't want to waste anybody's time here. I want to make sure that I've got all of my ducks in a row prior to that workshop so that we can go bing, bing, bing and be succinct. So that's my own personal request is that, if there's a workshop coming up that I need to get a little more done, and also, maybe in preparation for an evaluation too. I mean, we might need to have an extra meeting or two in there somewhere, but we'll be 100% transparent. I'll let you know about those, but I think twice a month, the Tuesdays prior to a meeting, and then maybe a workshop in there here or there. But I like your suggestion, Holly, an agenda committee. And we can add that to our list of committees. We'll do superintendent, chair, and vice chair. 2 hours a month. Perfect.
Yeah, because you're already doing it, so just give it a name.
Yep. No, I like that suggestion a lot. Thank you. And then Carson, we'll be the note taker. One of us will be the note taker and we'll send it out. This is the items that we've discussed. And remember, if you have any agenda items, make sure you get it to us before that Tuesday and be very clear, Jennifer, because I know you've sent a lot of emails about, hey, tell me more information about this or that, but I don't think it was clear to me, at least, that it was a topic that you wanted to see on the agenda. So just, if that's something that any of you would like to make sure to just let me know very clearly that let's have this be an agenda topic, that would be helpful. Perfect. Arlen?
Yeah, I just wondering if you might want to think this through a little bit, if you're going to call it a committee. Does that make it a public meeting? I don't have the answer. So and maybe it should be a public meeting. I'm not going to say one way or another. Past what maybe I was wrong in the past with what I was doing. I don't know, but the minute you start calling it a committee and you take notes, that's great. But if it is a committee, does that mean that the public is allowed to come and view it at that time?
I have no problem. Got nothing to hide. You're on mute, Pam. Still on mute, Madam Chair.
That's right. Sorry. I have nothing to hide either. There's no secret agendas. So, if we have it open to the public, I'm fine with that too. So not a big deal at all. If we do that. Holly.
Yeah, I'm going to put on my nerd brain. I did do 2 school board workshop trainings with MSBA, and the guy who was doing it, the first one I went to, he was like, do everything in public. Just do everything in public. Try to stay away from backdoor conversations or innuendos of conversations, and that was very, good for me to hear, because it reaffirmed that transparency really is the way to go when we're discussing public dollars. And the agenda has to be equal amongst all the players. So I was just nerding out on what he was lecturing us about for 3 hours.
Sounds good. All right. So are we ready to move on to Article 4?
Yeah, the only thing I'll add is that, we do have a meeting scheduled tomorrow at 8:30. There's no way we could give a 3-day notice. And so if we do start considering them public meetings, we'd like to start that probably on March 22nd, when we're bringing back all the other board meetings and committee meetings, I would guess. I suppose we could start it earlier and just post it as an in-person meeting.
Sounds good.
Okay. Yeah.
There is a little bit more information if we keep scrolling down, in Article 4 about minutes. And this was one where we had in our committee talked about fleshing out that information a little bit more about what specifically gets included in minutes, because by parliamentary procedures, like, action items need to be recorded. So you need to have, what the motion was, who seconded, and then what the votes were. But of course, it's helpful to have a little bit of context information, or like when it's the consent agenda, like, what were the items in the consent agenda? So I think this was an area where Karsten was maybe going to look at MSBA and see if they had documentation of like what needed to be in minutes, so that we can have it really clear, and that way that doesn't become an issue of contention down the road.
MSBA does have that, and I just did the clerk training to learn more about what to include there. So yeah, they have it all written out, really easy to follow. And it's not much. It's really just action items and your consent agenda is really all you have to include, and who is there.
Did they talk about, Jennifer, in the committee meetings at all?
They did not focus on the committee meetings, no. I believe they do have information on that, though.
Okay, we'll get that. I think that'd be a good one, because Anna hit the nail on the head there with the action items. Committees should be making a recommendation to the board on a topic to yay or nay it, usually by consensus. And we're not saying, we're saying that we go forward on the recommendation or not going forward with the recommendation for the board, because they'll ask us, and they should ask us, as we ask the superintendent his or her recommendation on a topic instead of having us do the work too. That's what we have the admin team for.
Yeah, the one thing that we'll want to check, and I think Jennifer and Arlen have both alluded to it in the past, is how do we list the approval of the consent agenda items? Because I think there's an argument that you list, for example, the hirings as one motion, or maybe even each hiring as a separate motion, or not. And so I think that's one issue. And then kind of a related issue is, we have the official meeting minutes that are approved by the board and signed by the clerk. But then exactly what should we provide to the local newspaper? And I think Big Nine schools are generally not sharing as much information as we have, just because there are videotapes, there's the official minutes, there are other sources of getting all the details. And my guess is that they've done that to save money. So, but I think that's another discussion point that we can have.
Just real quick, Madam Chair, if I may, good coverage or conversation. I struggle with somebody saying, just go back to the video and look at the video, because after 4.5 hour meetings, where do you find the doggone thing? We need to be a little bit more specific in our minutes to give us an idea what the dialogue was about. And I think Jennifer going to that training will help get that down the road for us. So.
Thanks for bringing that up, Anna. You're right. And we had gone through some of those past minutes, and for whatever reason, Arlen, what you had noticed was missing just started disappearing in 2020 in January. So we're not sure how that transpired or happened, but happy to get that back in there too. That makes perfect sense.
Well, it took me a year to figure it out then, didn't it?
Well, we've all had a lot on our minds lately.
I just happened to catch it that month. I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, don't apologize. It's best practice. So I think we need to be held accountable to that. Thank you. Article 4, communications. Anybody have anything they want to talk about there? I think it's just really important to highlight that, we do get as a board a lot of emails that are sent to all of us. And really, our policies state that it's best practice if one person responds for all of us. Usually I will say thank you for your feedback. We appreciate your comments or whatever, but I don't really go into it a lot, only because it's really difficult. Karsten, do you want to give a little bit more background on how we came to that, how this was before my time, so the history of
Sure.
that?
I know when I first started in Red Wing, board members would get, emails from time to time, especially with complaints. And I think, again, everyone's trying to do the right thing. But at the time, there could be 5, 6, even 8 different investigations going on because of one email. So, I would investigate or ask someone else to, and then each individual board member felt obligated that they needed to do the same thing. And so just imagine, how much time was taken because we had different investigations and they were comparing notes about what really happened. So that's when we started this particular procedure. And the thinking at the time, and that may have changed since then, but, we just want one person to respond. But then, I think, like Pam just mentioned, board members, often want to at least acknowledge that they've received it, they've read it. Thank you for sharing your thoughts. And so that's why some of the verbiage has changed. And typically, I'll say that, as per board protocol, I respond on behalf of the board. You may or may not receive individual responses. So, that's what I typically say. And then I get bored saying that. And so then I'll try to change it up a little bit. And now, fast forward a few years, we are getting a lot more emails sent to all board members, a lot more. Yeah, maybe my first year we'd get 20 total for the year. Now we're getting oftentimes more than 20 for a particular meeting, and that's good. We want to hear from people. Don't get me wrong, but responding to those, and I think that's important to respond as promptly as possible. But that is very time consuming. So, and I'm not suggesting a change. I think it's important to hear from people. It's important to at least acknowledge that we've received it, but it is an issue.
Arlen, you're in the queue.
Yeah, I don't see this in communications here, but I know communication between board members and the public and things like Facebook and stuff can maybe get quite involved if you aren't careful. Personally, myself, I thought when I came on the board, I'm going to great. I want to communicate to the public. I got a Facebook account. I was all ready to do stuff, and all of a sudden, I started seeing issues with somebody liking a post that they shouldn't look. And in the end, I never friended anybody except my wife and my brother. And I just want to caution everybody to be very careful how involved you get involved with social media. The public can just really literally tear you apart. They could do a lot of things. I don't know if we need a policy on social media, but I am a little concerned how things can go. And a couple controversial issues. COVID-19 has been one of them, and the board's response and people not liking the action. And it's not only board members, it's school staff. They're getting into it on social media, and I have been reading some of them, but I'm just going to put it out there that to be very careful how you use social media.
Holly, and then Nikki.
Yeah, after this situation with the city council and many constituents stating over and over again, I emailed them and they didn't respond. They don't respond in a timely manner. Why aren't they responding to us? Really brought up we've been inundated with emails and requests asking situations. And one time I copied and pasted a response to like 3 different people. And somebody's like, oh my gosh, you're lazy. You don't even know how to have an original response. I'm like, literally, I wanted to get the same information and I didn't want to deviate from what I was saying to people about a certain issue. So you could call it lazy. I call it efficient and clear, but it makes me wonder if there should be kind of a response that we are showing the community that we do respond, or we discuss it openly on how we want to go about doing this. But that was one of the things I heard loud and clear from people. Like if I email my representative, I want an answer. I get that. It's just food for thought. There's no.
I know it's a struggle, isn't it? Because it's, you open the can of worms, and it can be pretty complicated. You're exactly right. You're damned if you do, and you're damned if you don't. In some instances, too, you can't please everybody, and it's really hard. Which is why I think this boards in the past have had this conversation, and they've decided that they're going to leave it to the superintendent to respond to everybody, in a uniform way, so that everybody does get acknowledged. Not everyone's getting 7 or 8 responses, or not, some people get 3 and some people get 5 and some people get 1. And so, there is merit to having this conversation about how do we want to tackle that in email responses. Nikki, and then Anna.
With a lot of communication under my belt here and many different diverse systems, this is honestly, I'm going to give you guys props for this one, because I'm actually trying to get HRC on the same path is how this one is operated. I think we've gotten ourselves kind of in a whirlwind when we have one respond, and then it just, I think it just works better that if Karsten responds on behalf for many reasons. I'm not an emailer, and so it's just like the time consuming. So that's that. But on a note of what Arlen had said, I'm on social media I'm a very huge advocate of the things that I'm incredibly passionate about. And one right now that's a huge issue, and especially in Red Wing, is the racial issue. And so there's many things that I myself am working on as too, because I have trauma. I have a lot of historical trauma, but being allowed in many positions in Red Wing has allowed that to help. So I can be a key component in being a middle person when we have to merge all of our people together and move forward. You know, we have to heal that piece. So it's really important that I do my background work on it on my end, so I can be that voice. And so, but I think that Anna communicates very professionally and very beautifully to our people on social media. And so that's allowed me to be able, I get it, because as a person who has many different issues, if I keep speaking, and it's not intentional for us, I keep speaking. Here's an example as a mom. I tell my kids this thing, I tell them this, nice. Nobody listens. And then kabam, it blows, because now I got your attention, but it shouldn't have to get that far. So I really like that Anna is responding, and I think she's getting a very actually good response. I haven't seen any negatives from Anna. Anna can speak for herself on her end, but I think having certain people that have that gift, she is a neutral ground person, so she doesn't when we involve conversations, you can get an aggressive, which some people will get an aggressive from me. Well, yeah, on a lot of issues, you're going to get that aggression, because I have that passion, that trauma, that history. No excuse, moving forward and healing that. But that's where our great friend Anna comes in, and she can explain beautifully on behalf of all of us, on, without tripping anybody and getting them upset. And then everybody feels, yes, thank you. I feel heard. I feel valued. Thank you for answering that. So thank you for bringing that up, Arlen, on that issue on social media. So within this, not only just the community too, we're going to find our people that have their strong suits, and hopefully they'll just naturally fall into their seat. And then that's the beauty about all of us being very diverse. We have our gifts to bring this. And like I said, I told Arlen, I go, not going to lie, I wasn't scared joining the board, but I was like, oh geez, just because of what I heard from what everybody else had said, what kind of fight am I going to go up against? But when I actually got in on the inside, I was so thankful, because I see all of you as individuals. I see why you don't even have to tell me why you came here. It's through the work that you do. We all have that important piece. So once we kind of get through things like this and be on the same page and stuff, I think we can really soar high and making huge strides and change for this district.
Really well said. Thanks, Nikki. Anna, and then Jim.
Well, thank you, Nikki, for your compliments. I do try, on social media, I think I try not to put my own personal opinions out there, but just to kind of share the information, especially when, there are a lot more people watching our board meetings now. And but people aren't necessarily watching it with the same attention that those of us who are in the meeting are are experiencing. So people will say like, oh, I only watched this part, what happened? And people are trying to recap. So I try to just, when I see that type of thing, to jump in and say, these were the things that were decided and this is what this means, based on my understanding of things. But without trying to not put my own personal opinions in there. So, I mean, it could be something that we want to include in this section, to just say that, individual board members need, I don't know how to word it, but, exercise caution that you do not speak for the district as a whole on social media, because that's something that I try to say, like, if somebody asks me a question, I can say like, well, from my understanding, based on this document, this is what this means, but this is the person you really need to talk to about it, because I don't know all of the workings of the district, and it's important for me to not give out misinformation, even if it's unintentional. One thing that I think, I just wonder if it's a possibility. Lisa sends out a great summary of the board meeting to the district, to the staff. And I think perhaps something like that, it's not official minutes, but maybe if something like that can go out, or be posted on Facebook or something like that, because, I think it was Jim was saying, the meeting, when a meeting is 4 hours long, if you want to see what happened in this part, like, who wants to sit through 4 hours of that to get to that information? And we're not going to approve the minutes for a minimum of 2 weeks, until we have a meeting again. So I just wonder if there's if there's more that we can do with communications and, of course, when it's a big issue like the back to school, Karsten sends out an email to the entire district to say, this is a major decision that was made that is affecting everybody. And, this is what the plan is now going forward. But for some of those smaller decisions, I guess, or, less impactful, I just wonder if there's a way to maybe get that information out with the understanding that it's not official minutes, but that, just to keep that communication open and to shut down the misinformation where, somebody interpreted something differently as they were listening to a meeting while cooking dinner for their kids, like, I know how that happens. So, just to make sure that we're getting good information out to the public, and that the public can then be more engaged and know what's going on. I don't know what the solution is, but this is something that I've been thinking about.
Yeah, Lisa and I can come up with a plan on how to better share that with more than just staff members. Yeah, I think that's a good suggestion.
Really good suggestion. Jim.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Communication. It's really one of the thorns in many organizations, problems and relationships on boards. So any way we can improve on communication, let's go on. I think that's a great idea, Anna, about sharing that information that Lisa takes her time to compile with more than just the staff. So I think that's great. Emails. Back when I was commissioner for 16 years, I got a bunch of phone calls, emails, visits, all that. So you want to respond back to them somehow. I've just taken the approach myself. Anybody comes at me very pointed or negative, I'm not going to stir the pot and probably communicate back with that person. So I just let it lie. I don't do social media. Arlen, I hope you have more than 2 friends, or at least your wife and brother are still your friend. So, because I don't do Facebook, but people do tell me what's on social media. I do have that. And I'm old enough to realize computers, many of you weren't even born when computers came into existence. I surround myself with good people. That's why about computers and how I can do that. But end of the day, communication is one of the major stumbling blocks that boards, businesses, and relationships suffer. And any way we can improve on that will pay dividends for all of us for years to come. Sorry, Arlen.
Holly.
Yes, Jim, I completely agree with you. Communication is the bane of the existence. And Anna, I have to say, every time I see your response, I feel a sense of relief. Oh, like, oh, good, Anna did good. She put it right out there. I don't have to respond. I don't have to do anything. Because you are tempted to kind of want to clarify or support something. And then you got this nice little diatribe, and I'm like, good job, Anna. I don't have to do anything. So yes, Nikki, you're right. But I did want to say it is hard to know when. But Jim, hearing you say that you do respond to people, that's where I was kind of, my head was at with thinking about when the city council made their decision and people wanted answers. Sometimes the answer isn't the answer, but it's a response.
And sometimes we forget sometimes who put us here. It's the people that voted, the public, those business owners, the homeowners, the parents, the senior citizens. Those are the ones that are here. We need to remember, the reason we're here is they cast trust and votes for us to be here, to be one of the 7 on this board during this time period. So
I think sometimes where we get tripped up is, I'll get a call from a constituent saying, my daughter didn't get this at school and I want you to do something about it, and so then, the knee-jerk reaction is, oh, I got to fix this for you, right? But, you always go back to, well, who's your teacher? Who's your principal? Have you talked to them? Here's the superintendent's number, and not get deep down diving into those investigations. That's not our job. That's not our role. But thank you for reaching out. Your voice is really important to me. And I really appreciate your, your continued support of the district. Here's this person that I think will be able to help you. So, Jennifer.
I have 2 things. One, I would agree with what Nikki and Holly said, Anna. I really appreciate your comments on Facebook and social media. But one thing that we as a board need to be careful of too on social media is not responding. I think it's great that Anna does, but then the rest of us should not also, because we have to be careful about having a quorum there. That's why I don't even like your comments, Anna. Even though I love them, but I don't, just to be careful of that. And then the second thing is I think it's important that we remember that communication also is listening. And I think that's something that we really need to work on is how can we pull community members in to be able to hear their voices, and community members from all parts of the community. We heard from a large group about going back to school, but we didn't hear from a good section of our district. And so how can we make people more comfortable coming to us and telling us what they think and what they need and how they feel? And I know Nikki is doing some good work on that, and I can't wait to hear more about what she's got planned, but I just think that needs to be a focus for us.
Well said. All right, it's already 8 o'clock. The Article 5 is on policies. Article 6 is on planning, the planning cycle, human resource plan, financial plan, facilities plan. And then Article 7 is school board members. Does anybody have anything of those last 3 articles that really need to be addressed tonight? Glaring pieces of those 3 articles? The other thing I'll ask you is, in this draft of a booklet here on procedures for school board, is there anything that isn't in here that should be included? And maybe that's something food for thought that we don't have to address right now, but this is a working document, a work in progress. It's not going to be carved in stone. So let's continue to have these conversations. I think this is so important for us to have these conversations. So we're all on the same page. We're all operating under the same umbrella. And I'm so glad that we've had this discussion and conversation tonight, because I think it's been very valuable. So definitely keep that at the forefront of your mind, maybe on your desk. We can, let Carson or myself or Jim know, if there are things that we'd like to add that we can bring back to this group to add into that booklet. The next piece on our agenda is meeting effectiveness and efficiency, which I'm trying to do right now by moving that stuff along. There's a good list of many ideas, 14, on how we can continue moving our meetings along. And, you know, I'll take a lot of credit for having some long meetings, because there's a fine line between making sure everybody has their say and being able to bring discussions to the table, but also being able to move us forward. So I always err on the side of being too long, because I want to make sure you all have an opportunity to say what's on your mind. And I never want anyone to feel like I've cut themselves off or I've cut you off. And so, you know, I will fully admit that that's a struggle of mine. But are there other things that I can help, or we can do as a group to keep moving our meetings along so we don't have any more 4-hour meetings? And I get that the 4-hour meeting or the 4.5-hour meeting had to happen because there was a lot going on at that moment. And hopefully we won't have to ever tackle that kind of 4.5-hour meeting again. But, I just want to keep moving us forward and being really good at what we do here.
Madam Chair, you and I think we've talked, we just informally about stuff. One is, and I maybe I brought this up, so if I'm preaching to the choir, just tell me I've already said this. Having people come and present to us is great, but don't read what they sent to us for us to read. We read it, then sometimes they start reading it to us. That's counterproductive. If somebody doesn't want to read it, that's their own problem. But I take the time to read it, then they get read to me. We can save time there. Just bullet points, a few topics, any questions, because we've already had the item read by ourselves because they sent it to us in the packet. The other thing is the virtual meetings do take longer because you have to do all the roll call and all that. And I think months down the road, when we get more in person, I'm hoping that our time frames will be less as we venture into the in-person thing whenever down the road. That's just my take. But and we talked about shortening up the people that are presenting, because they send the information out of either a presentation, however they do it, and then we can go forward. So.
Well, and I think one thing that will also help us is that if we list out all of our school board meetings for the whole year, we don't have to, make the next agenda super heavy and then the next one light. I mean, we can balance things out a little bit better. So I think if we have that, I'm a visual person. So if we have every single meeting lined up on a piece of paper and we, stagger out the agenda items, we can spread out some of those presentations so we're not having so many at once or back to back. Anna, you're in the queue.
There we go. Yeah, so I have two thoughts. One is about the presentations. I wonder if some of them could be shifted to workshops. Because I think some of the presentations, I'm thinking about ones in particular before I was a board member, but watching them, I found them really interesting and, good information, but yet they weren't really, a couple that I'm thinking of didn't really have an action item. It wasn't something that was being proposed that needed to be voted on. And as a board member, I definitely want to hear from all of these different, like when a new curriculum is being introduced and how that's going to work, or, a new program or changes in a big program like the Flight Path program. I think the more information that we can all have and the chance to meet with those people who are responsible for it, the better. But in a meeting when we have a lot of things that need to be decided upon, I'm not sure that that's the best time for that informational type stuff. And, like you said earlier, Pam, you'd rather have like a 3-hour meeting than 2 meetings that are less than 3 hours, and so that's a fair argument too, that, maybe it's better to have them in a meeting than to have that be like a separate thing. But if there are areas in which, kind of a presentation about something that's not a pressing decision issue fits in with a workshop discussion, topic, maybe that's a good place to put that. So it's informative, but not based on the decision making. The other thing that I think it's more an issue with the virtual meeting format, but when we're in this virtual format, when I have the floor, I want to get out all of my questions, because like it's going to take a while to cycle back around to me. But I wonder, then sometimes I think we kind of end up on these little rabbit trails that I wonder if it's easier, kind of like when we went through, that the document that we just went through, the handbook, to say like, okay, item 1, or do you have questions related to, this specific aspect of it? And then who has questions about that? Do you have questions about, like for the back to school plan, do you have questions about the safety questions for Shonda? And I know we've done some of that. So it's based on like who you have a specific question for. And I think that might help too. I think some of that is just the nature of a virtual meeting where we can't have the faster, more organic conversations without talking over each other. But I don't know if maybe that's another area that we could tweak a little bit to kind of break down those conversations.
Thanks, Anna. Good points. Nikki.
I personally, I don't like the email. I like the in-person discussion. And this is my very left brain, very oral, traditional people. So being able to discuss and hearing, and also when this is something that I and many other Indigenous people go through that many white people don't understand. But when we enter into a world of governments and documents, the system was literally created to not benefit people like us. So, and it comes off of that, the treaty era where you're writing words to confuse, to trick a little bit. So the writing and email world is, and this will always come up numerous times when we are discussing many, not all, and it's not just Indigenous people, it's non-Indigenous people. It's just the way we learn. We're more visual and oral and in person. I like Anna's suggestion, and also I have ADHD, and when I'm trying to teach other ADHDers, I have a time limit. I have to get in, and I myself practice this. I have to get in as much information in a short amount of time, because otherwise I'm losing my target audience. So being able to come in and getting all the words that I have to get out in a timely manner. In a lot of different systems that I operate in, we do have time limit increments, because we are so busy in business, and we do have to keep on topic on things in order to. So that just could be a suggestion too, is kind of learning how to do our deliverance in a timely manner, especially when we deal with people who have attention issue problems.
I like the time limits. I try to do that, but maybe I need to like put some time numbers behind agenda items and just keep moving us along. That's really
yeah. And this is what I really like about you, Pam. You're very considerate of other people, their feelings. You are very considerate, and you don't want to be disrespectful. And I really appreciate about that about you. And then, so maybe this is something that you and I can work on too, because I'm good with fast and efficient, and you are good with, and it's not that I'm not good with being respectful to other people's time, but maybe we can come in and just kind of discuss that and how we can better be more efficient and respectful together with other people's time, with keeping our focus on track, because we don't like to go over in minutes, and I'm zipping.
I like it. Perfect. Thank you. Are there any other suggestions that aren't listed here for the meeting efficiency? It's a work in progress again. We're going to keep working on it. All right. Thank you.
I think it's really good. And I think also it's helpful to have, like with number 7, the clear motions. It's really helpful when there's something that has specific language, I appreciate Karsten and, you know, whoever is working with you on those motions when it's a specific recommendation, or, you know, maybe that's something that some of us need to do in the committees as well, is to come up with that wording then so that it's ready to go for the meeting, and easier to tweak when we have changes to come up with. I think sometimes that ends up being a stumbling block, is how do I word this on the fly?
Yes, that's a really good point. All right. Anything else on the meeting efficiencies? Work in progress, but I think it's good to have this discussion. The last thing I just wanted to talk with you all about is that I did get a community request. It's called Adopt a Winger program. This is not actionable on the student or with our school board, but she does want to have school district buy-in. So I wanted to share this with all of you. It's called an Adopt a Winger program, and it was inspired by a program that began in the Stewartville School District. It's basically a buddy program. It's like a parent or community member gets paired up with a staff member, anybody on our staff, and they send the community member would send a note or an email, hey, you're doing a great job. A piece that's really been missing the last couple of years in our school district is that we used to have a parent advisory committee that would meet, our PACs, and a big piece of what PACs did was teacher appreciation events. And that really has gone by the wayside. And our community wants to recognize and support our teachers, our staff, to make sure that they know that they are appreciated. And so it's completely voluntary. Teachers don't have, or anybody in our staff, it's open to everybody. But it's voluntary. So if they want to put their hat in the ring, they certainly can. And then this person, our community person, would pair them with a community member. And then the expectation is to send emails, a card of encouragement. Maybe the teacher needs some cutting of supplies, or maybe a teacher needs more glue. It doesn't mean that the parent or this community member has to provide the glue, but maybe they start a glue drive, and get 10 friends to donate 1 bottle of glue. It's those kinds of little things, just the little things that our staff are missing right now. And we're a community that shows we care about our staff. They've gone above and beyond and done a lot of extra things. So anyway, I just wanted to share that with you. I can send you out her whole proposal. It's 4 pages. I think I'll just email that to you now. Again, I don't think it's actionable, but she does want us to know about it and kind of give her a thumbs up if this is something that she can take and roll with. So I do love that idea too, Nikki. I just think that there's so much good that our community wants to do, and to be able to have somebody who's willing to pair up staff with community members for a little encouragement, an email here and there, just to be able to say thank you. So anyway, I just wanted to tell you that.
Could Karsten or Pam or somebody do you know why the PACs no longer operate? I don't know the history of that. I was involved in one when my kids were in Cobble Kids, and then it was off my radar, out of my ability to work with, and so then I just lost track of how what happened.
I think with significant involvement like that, kind of ebbs and flows. And I know several years ago we had several active elementary PACs, well, 2 of them, one for Sunnyside and one for Burnside. The middle school and high school haven't had really active parent committees, but then there'd be other groups that would really help with prom, or with parties after graduation, or whatever the issue might be. Now a lot of those folks have gone through the system, or they've taken other interests, and so I know they're really having some challenging times encouraging people to come to those parent committees. And so that's kind of where we are, and that's why we just haven't had a good attendance. I've talked to other superintendents too, and we're not alone. People are busy, there's a lot going on, and it's a time commitment, that's for sure.
Yeah, we just stopped getting people coming. I mean, nobody would come. I'd go to the Twin Bluff one and I'd be the only one there. So, yeah, it's tough. Arlen.
The problem with the PACs was their failure to file IRS documents and having people keep up with them. They got in trouble for not, I believe it was annual registration and reporting of the finances going through there. And it's not only there, but some of our other athletic organizations got into the same type of problem. They corrected it. They had the resources, but for the small resources that are there, the government reporting items can be an issue. And that's when I believe 2 of the PACs fell apart at that point because they didn't have the people to file that federal paperwork.
Yeah, I think that was an issue as well. And of course, when you're filing paperwork like that, it takes even a stronger time commitment from someone on the committee. And as you're kind of shifting in and out, or as your kids go from one school to another, there are just some natural changes that make it more challenging to be sustainable. I really miss them because those parent committees with the elementary schools were fantastic. I met some great people that way, and we were able to really communicate with people about some different school issues.
Well, and maybe this is a conversation for another time, but maybe with the world of Zoom meetings now, a lot of issues too, where parents were working during the day. Some of the meetings were happening during the day. Impossible to get there if you're a working parent. Sometimes, they'd be held in the night. And if you're a working parent, you might have the evening shift, or you've worked all day and you're exhausted and you don't want to go back out. So, it maybe in the world of Zoom, maybe people would be more interested in attending this kind of a meeting. So maybe that's a platform that we can think about moving forward. But anyway, I just wanted to tell you that there are community members out there that want to recognize our staff. And hopefully if we get the thumbs up from you, if you give us the green light, she'd love to be able to just, it's all voluntary. And it's really not monetary. It's just a way to express appreciation. So awesome. Well, with that, I will, it's 8:19. I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All right.
Anna,
Jim.
second.
Okay. Moved by Jim, seconded by Anna. Jim.
Aye.
Nikki Buck.
Aye.
Marilyn Derricks.
Aye.
Anna Ostendorf.
Aye.
Holly Tower.
Aye.
Jennifer Tift.
Aye.
Chair says aye. We are adjourned at 8:19. And I'll just say thank you for your flexibility in meeting tonight too. I know that was not on our original schedule, but thank you for your flexibility. I very much appreciate it. And I think we had a great discussion tonight.
And that's just came out of our last meeting on Tuesday to say, hey, let's shoot it out for Monday to see who's going to be around.
Yes, you did. It
Glad
was
we got her in. So
Yeah.
have a good night, everybody.
That in a note to me.
What's that?
I would have loved a little email update on that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks. Have a
Good night.
Night.
Bye.